Hey, welcome to another episode in this series about Japanese history during the Middle Ages. The focus of this episode will be trade, arts, and nature in Japan around the Tokugawa period. So, what we've learned so far is that Japan once had many regions who were under the control and leadership of a clan chief. This divided nation became more unified when Shogun Minamoto took control of the government and seized power from the emperor. This was known as the Kamakura period. This is also when the feudal system began to shape the way in which Japanese society was organized. In 1603, the new shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu strengthened feudalism in Japan. I really want to examine the Tokugawa period in more depth to help us understand how life changed during the rule of the shogun and to discover why this period came to an end. The Tokugawa period lasted about 250 years and brought much change to Japan. There was less internal conflict between samurai warlords and more unity and stability amongst the people of Japan. During this period, there were many significant changes that occurred which brought about the modernization of Japan, such as the development of housing, buildings, and roads, so that people could travel more freely between areas. This allowed for greater trade to occur between cities, which became increasingly important. Education, which was once considered only for the nobles, was now becoming more available for other groups of people in Japan. Tokugawa Ieyasu established his headquarters in the city of Edo, which is now called Tokyo. He built the Tokyo Imperial Palace, formerly known as Edo Castle, where he would govern Japan from. The Emperor of Japan, however, did not live in Edo but remained in Kyoto. Edo did become the new center of Japan, and roads were built so that daimyo and their samurai and traders could travel easily to and from the city. In more agricultural areas, farmers were given more land to grow crops as technological developments allowed greater access to irrigation for farming. This meant that farmers were able to produce a lot more crops, and as a result, the shogun became very wealthy from taxes and the resources gathered. During this period, the trade of goods such as handicrafts, silk and cotton, and pottery became more common. The first important change that occurred during this period, it meant that nature became more protected by laws. As population numbers and building developments increased, there was a greater demand for natural resources, particularly timber to build houses. Timber was an important material used in Japanese buildings such as shrines, houses, and castles. This growing demand for timber meant that large numbers of trees were being cut down from forest for use in building or for fire. As a result of this deforestation, soil erosion and flooding occurred. The shogun recognized this and made a set of rules for using the forest and who could own land with forest on it, called the Forest Management Policy. This meant that more trees would be planted and less cut down. Only the daimyo, or the shogun, could allow people the privilege of cutting any trees down or entering the forest. The second important change occurred relates to foreign affairs and trade. Foreign affairs just refers to the interactions that occur between one nation and another. During the Tokugawa period, the shogun made the rules about who could trade with Japan and who could enter Japanese land. For much of this period, Japan was closed off to the outside world. For a small period of time, Ieyasu issued 350 permits to his favorite daimyo to allow merchants to travel and trade goods in Southeast Asia. He also allowed 12 European and 11 Chinese traders to trade goods in Japan. These merchants sold copper, diamonds, swords, and artifacts for silk, sugar, and deerskin. Dutch merchants sold weapons such as rockets and firearms to Japan. This was the first time explosive weapons were seen and used in Japan. As trade grew and the availability of new goods such as weapons increased, many daimyo wanted access to these traders as they thought it would give them greater power. As a result of their interaction with the outsiders, they were exposed to new ideas, technologies, and religions. One of these was Christianity, which rapidly grew until Ieyasu saw it as a threat to Japan. He thought it would upset the stability of the nation as people people were allowed to interact between different social groups. Christians then were persecuted in Japan for many years. In 1633, a new shogun called Iemitsu imposed a policy of isolation on Japan called Sakoku, which means locked country. This was to limit the westernization of Japan caused by interactions with foreigners from the West. He did not want their ideas, beliefs, or technologies to influence Japan anymore. Western books were banned and Christian practices were banned. Any Japanese person who left the country and returned could be put to death. This policy remained in place until 1853, when Commodore Matthew Perry strongly insisted trade be opened between America and Japan. The third and last major change that occurred was in the area of arts. Arts such as origami, poetry, theatre, martial arts, including jiu-jitsu, ken jiu-jitsu, and sumo wrestling became popular in society. These were more socially accepted and popular as entertainment and recreational activities. The power and rule of the shogun declined when Japanese people lost faith in his ability to limit the influence and power of Westerners entering Japan. In 1867, the shogun handed back power to the emperor, who then became the ruler of the country. The emperor made Japan a Shinto nation, which enforced his power as they believed the emperor was a living god. The areas once controlled by the daimyo were now returned to the emperor, who divided these regions into areas called prefectures, which were now run by governors. Okay, let's sum up what we learned so far. Japan once was a divided nation. It then became a strong nation, unified by the feudal system and the rule of the shogun. During this time, there was a period of peace where the country became more modernized from Western influences. There were periods where Japan was closed off to trade and interactions with the outside world. Lastly, Japan's shoguns came to an end when power was handed back to the emperor. Thanks for watching. View other episodes in this series on my channel.